Hello, everybody. And this is now daytime, as you can see behind me, and I hope the image comes through sufficiently well. We are working here in the rays and the initiations, and we're working in the second part of the book, and we're dealing with the all-important antakarana section. So we're working already on page 506. It's coming up to an important 507, to which I always refer. So let's go on with what the Tibetan says. He's been giving us the six stages of building the antakarana, and he's been talking about where we draw the energy from and the intensity of the point of tension necessary, and the identicality of the first two stages for all ray types. The first two stages, intention and visualization. And also he's been talking about the 7 ray techniques, or 7 words of power, and I think he's going to get into this now. As we consider these 7 ray techniques with their accompanying words of power, you must bear carefully in mind that we are dealing entirely with the will aspect. This is the curriculum of the will. When we attempt to contact the soul on the second and third subplanes of the higher mental plane, well then we are dealing with the love aspect. But once we enter the spiritual triad, considered as the representation of the monad, then the will aspect enters. And that's why we must fortify our point of tension on the fourth subplane of the mental plane with the will aspect of the soul, to give it, to generate the projective power we need to reach into the higher levels of our own energy system. So we are dealing entirely with the will aspect. This necessitates a higher process of alignment and the evocation of a divine aspect hitherto relatively quiescent. So let's point those out. In dealing with the will aspect, we need a higher process of alignment and also the evocation of a divine aspect, the spiritual triad, which has hitherto been relatively quiescent, except insofar as the will, or maybe he means here a divine aspect, he means the will aspect. That's what he means. The will aspect, except insofar as the will finds its reflection in the activity of the sacrifice petals of the egoic lotus, plus its distorted shadow in the mind nature. So 2 areas of reflection for the will, and that is the LS. Let's make that one of our items. Sacrifice petals. Okay. So the sacrifice petals. Whoops. Maybe I went too far with that one. Sacrifice SACR. SACPTLS. Sacrifice petals. No, it looks right. It looks right. Okay, that's all right. The sacrifice petals and the mind. This consequently posits a fairly high stage of spiritual unfoldment upon the part of the builder of the antakarana. You know, usually, let's just say usually around the time of the second initiation, or when, let us say, put it here, at least when the Second initiation is in sight. And I'm realizing how many, outstandingly many, of these abbreviations I did have. Second initiation. Okay. When the second initiation is in sight, as it was for so many of DK's disciples, the ones he was communicating with in the books Dinah 1 and 2. It means that there are indications of it, to say the least, between the mind, the sacrifice petals, and the atmic principle. So the word here is indications, and we have to be carrying some indications of the will energy. Some indications of the will energy. CA. Okay. This may be simply the most tenuous thread imaginable. Well, we don't see those threads. Maybe the Tibetan does, I suspect. 1,000 times finer than a gossamer web, but it must inevitably be present. The connection between these three must be present. When from the angle of the esotericist this is a tangible fact, you will then have the following direct contact. So much to ponder over here, isn't there? So we're invoking the will, even if it is via a thread of energy which is 1,000 times finer than gossamer. Excuse me, you will have the following direct contact. This contact then is completed. Let's see if I have this correct. Looks like I do. This contact is then completed. When completed, marks an entire unit of spiritual work, if I might so word it, bringing the man upon the physical plane into complete alignment. Well, I suppose it brings us all the way to the monad, really. This unity is consummated at the time of the fourth initiation, when causal body disappears for all practical purposes. That's another good one. Okay, for all practical purposes. The great renunciation, at which time the first aspect begins to dominate the other two. At which time? Now, let's just say at the third initiation, the first aspect comes into true consciousness, but there is not a domination of the second by the first. This occurs, or at least begins to occur at the fourth initiation, and maybe is well established by the fifth initiation. And that will be another one we want to have. Fifth initiation. Okay. So a complete unit of spiritual work is achieved here. Complete alignment comes about, eventually with the monad. This is consummated at the time of the fourth initiation, the great renunciation, at which time the first aspect begins to dominate the other two. Just because we have the first aspect active at the third initiation does not mean that it dominates. Then the soul life, as hitherto understood. Now note that, it doesn't mean there will still be soul life. Soul is a universal. Let's see, that's universe. UL, UNL. I think that's a good one to have. UNL, UNL, and we'll call that universal. Universal. It's a universal principle. Soul is a universal principle. But the soul life as hitherto understood, which means that it is the soul within the shroud of the causal body, then that soul life fades out and the causal body disappears. The sum total of memory, quality, and acquirements is then absorbed into the monad, but I've researched this a little, and it is true that it is absorbed into the monad, but there is a caveat here, and let us just say, but first absorbed into the permanent atoms of the spiritual triad, and then the monad, but eventually into the monad. The words, I and my Father are one, become true. Who could possibly suspect what the Christ meant in an energetic sense when he said that? I and my monad are one. I and Sanat Kumara are one. The monad is one with Sanat Kumara. Then they become true. The astral body also vanishes in the same great process of renunciation, and the physical body and automatic agent of the vital body is no longer needed, though it persists and serves a purpose when so required by the monad. So love takes the place of the astral body. And this, the matter of which the phantasmagoria of the astral plane was composed may remain, or the entire personality may vanish in its original form and have to be reconstructed as a Maya Varupa. That's another good one, isn't it? I'm trying to encourage you along here. Maya Virupa, a body of Maya. Okay. And let's see, the phantasmagoria, the matter of which the phantasmagoria of the astral body was composed may remain. So, you know, this is interesting. What is said here, the personality need not entirely vanish at the time of the fourth initiation. It can be, aspects of it can be retained, but a big change occurs in the astral body. And it is no longer what it was. I suppose the misleading phantasma, that's a goria, are no longer found. Misleading phantasmagoria is no longer found, but on the astral plane, if the initiate chooses to work there, that phantasmagoria does exist. Okay, so PHT looks like a good one. PHT, and we'll call that phantasmagoria, which are false forms, you know. And AP, astral plane, that certainly is an important one. All right. So I and my father are one. We are not in a position to realize the nature of that kind of consciousness, but we're on our way as we study the will and as what I call the curriculum of being leads us there. He leads us there. The astral body, in terms of its phantasmagoria, vanishes in the same great process of renunciation. And so let's just say there are certainly no longer any selfish or personal desires, or one is a member of the planetary logos. And the physical body as an automatic agent of the vital body, apparently the vital body does and can remain. The vital body does and can remain, is no longer needed, though it persists or can persist and serves a purpose when so required by the monad. I mean, you would suspect that in the case of Master DK, he was working with an older physical body. He was a master. He was working with a body which was created by natural means, apparently. It was not a Maya Virupa, so that persisted. And maybe we can assume that he recapitulated or took the fourth initiation in that particular incarnation in which Madame Blavatsky knew him in Tibet. In any case, we can't say about what the vehicle for him is now. We don't know that unless somebody does know. But the dense physical body was a body produced by natural means and obviously was a very old vehicle. Of course, they know the method of retaining the vehicle if they wish to. From the form aspect, you then have the monad, the sphere of the spiritual triad. It will be a sphere, once the three vehicles are organized or coordinated, and the etheric body upon the physical plane. This is discussed in the 160s in a treatise on cosmic fire. So let's see here. This will be vehicles. Okay. I would hear, so what do we have? From the form, we have the monad, we have the spiritual triad, the sphere of the spiritual triad consisting of three coordinated vehicles, at last, coordinated. The Buddhic vehicle is not really coordinated until after the third initiation, and the etheric body upon the physical plane, and this is sometimes called at this stage, where can I go here? Right. Sometimes called the body of fire. I would remind you that the levels of conscious existence which we regard as formless are only relatively so because our seven planes are the seven subplanes of the cosmic physical plane. Well, in a way, to me anyway, anything, let's see if I can get this correct. To me, any existent which is not the absolute is form. But that's another subject to be discussed and debated. The center of consciousness is now in the will nature. Now, minimally, this would mean the atmic plane. when this point of attainment is reached and is no longer in the love nature. Though, of course, we do live in a solar system which is a love wisdom solar system. So from a higher point of view, love always dominates, but from the point of view of our own energy system, we are dealing with the will aspect of it. Activity and love are still present in full measure, but the focus of the initiate's attention is in the will aspect of divinity, and I think we're talking pretty much all this really beginning at the fourth initiation. I'm just so impressed by the information which Master DK is giving us and which we need to interpret and apply. So, there are variations to the rules, and the personality can be retained. I think it was in the case of Master Decay, but the astral body is no longer what it was, and eventually all the elementals are banished, all the Lunar Lords are banished, and the personality nature is recreated along the lines of the fifth initiation vehicle. Maybe if you can do that at the fourth degree, it would be along the lines of the fourth initiation vehicle, the vehicle you had, personality vehicle you had when you were taking the fourth initiation. At least we need to be able to look forward to these eventualities with some kind of accuracy. Okay. Right. Astral plane. Okay. It has been said in an ancient book belonging to the Master's archives. Can't you just imagine the library card required there? Maybe you have to show your certificate of mastership to get into that particular library. And this is the one to which I always refer. I always refer to this couple of paragraphs. The preservation of values is the task of the initiate of the first ray. We can always remember that as a very strong encapsulation of what the task of these various types of initiates may be. The preservation of values is the task of the initiate of the first ray. So here and this is like, we might call it, never really had to think about it before, the preservation of the archetype. There is one that I always use. So the preservation of the, and let's call it divine purpose intended archetype, or the divinely intended archetype. But I see I've made a mistake here. DPR, and that has to be divine purpose. Whoop, PUR. It's quite a thing to discriminate plan from purpose, but we have to learn to do so. Purpose is resident on the second and first subplanes of the cosmic physical plane, i.e. the monadic and logoic subplanes, and the plan begins somehow in the Brahmic worlds and relates to the lower 5 subplanes in the working out. On the plane of Atma, I think the first formulation of the divine plan is occurring by the custodians of the plan, who are higher members of the hierarchy. The preservation of values is the task of initiate of the first ray. The attainment of positivity is the goal the goal of the initiate of the second ray. They are so sensitive, but not to be overcome by sensitivity, but to see the way through in the light, no matter how difficult the circumstances appear. So the Christ has this, what's called calmness, forever unperturbed. And he is able to see the archetype and the eventuality of the working out of the archetype and not give in to any kind of depression, negativity, which would stand in the way of the expression of this archetype. So, no matter how depressing the circumstances and how difficult they seem, there's always a way through, let's say, put it like this, the divine vision always reveals the way, well, let's do it this way through. And we know the second ray is associated with what is called the quality of the hidden vision. So you look for that in Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2. And of course, it's not ray limited. I guess everybody has to have these methods of developing soul sensitivity and expression. Everyone needs that, but the second ray has a particular connection with it. He who works upon the third ray must reach the path from here to there. This is movement through space. It involves extension and strategy, method, we might say plan. So, and it is the will to evolve. And I think that's another one that I want to put in there, the WTE, and that's the will to evolve, which DK said was equivalent to education. Different rays are associated with education. The second ray, in a broad and general sense, involving education, which leads to wisdom. The third ray, also in a general sense, which involves the coordination and correlation of the many factors of knowledge. The fifth ray is involved also with education, and many of our universities are examples of the fifth ray approach, where we understand the facts of the matter of any particular area of study. With the third ray, we see the wider place of that area of study within a series of higher relations, and with the second ray, we understand the relation of the broader picture of relations from the abstract mind to wisdom, to some kind of understanding which is always so, and which is eternal. Knowledge is fleeting, and wisdom is eternal. The initiate of the fourth ray arrives at the will aspect. See, what we're talking about is arrival at the will aspect. So all of these things, all of these statements about the initiate in relation are statements about the initiate in relation to the will aspect. All of these statements concern the relation of the initiate to the will aspect. So maybe when the first ray type preserves values, the will is strengthened. When the second ray type achieves positivity, the will is strengthened. When the third ray type reaches from here to there and changes its position in space, it arrives at knowledge of the will aspect. Of course, it takes will to do all these things, but you use will, and then a higher form of will comes in with the proper execution of the will you have used. Anyway, the initiate of the fourth ray arrives at the will aspect when conflict steps into its rightful place and causes no undue concern. We must say this, that members of the fourth creative hierarchy must expect conflict all along the way. And just excuse me here. I know a few minutes will be taken from each of these presentations to put these in, but seems the best way in the last analysis. Fourth creative hierarchy, okay. So there will be conflict, and we are members of a warring kingdom, but let's just say we must not lose our faculties and their proper and expert exercise just because there is conflict. These four attainments mark the goal for men and sway them all upon the lower point of consciousness. You know, we are aspiring, let's just say, we are aspiring to be initiates, and this means that we are still working within a lower point of consciousness, striving for triadal and monadic, what can I call it, beingness. Now, there's a little bit more here. The ray of vision and of application indicates the way direct. Now, evokes the will to follow and welds the love of God, the love of man, and all that breathes into the purpose underlying all. Well, this much is clear, and towards that purpose and its earthly consummation, the seventh ray gives all it has. The idea is the earthly consummation worked out in the forms of the dense physical body of the planetary logos or the solar logos, or even simply upon the etheric physical plane. But now, what is the ray of vision? Let's just say this must be the sixth ray, because, you know, I see a vision that satisfies desire. The sixth ray type is always following the vision with great enthusiasm. And now, does this represent yet another ray? I think it does. The ray of application is the fifth ray. He seems to have them. These are presented in a different order. 6 first, and then 5. Indicates the way direct. Well, they are both very focused rays. Evokes the will to follow. This is the sixth ray, and welds the love of God. The fusing power of the fifth ray is very strong. Even the welders, of course, work with the fifth ray, and they're very Vulcanian, and they heat matter up so that there can be a welding. So when we see a word like welding, a word like weld suggests the fifth ray. This is my interpretation for the moment, at least. and wells the love of God, the love of man, and all that breathes into the purpose underlying all. Remember the relationship. And there's one of those words we need. Remember. Remember the relationship between the fifth ray and the first. Between the fifth ray and the first ray. Okay. Those whose souls are upon the fifth ray resolve onto the first ray. And the welding process, well, when you think about the mind and the statement, three minds unite, this statement suggests the welding process and has to do, as the word of power, with the fifth ray. So let's see, what have I got here? Okay, different. These are presented in a different order. Indicates the way direct, the ray of vision and of application. Well, maybe the word should be indicate instead of indicates. The way direct, both the fifth and sixth ray have the way direct, evokes the will to follow, that's the sixth ray, and welds, that's the fifth ray, the love of God, the love of man, and all that breathes into the purpose underlying all. This factor of melting a substance and then using it in its extreme heat to form a bond. We think here of, here's welding. One thinks of Vulcanian bonds created through welding. The love of God, the love of man, and all that breathes, there is a unity there. Think about the third initiation where the fifth ray dominates and everything becomes realized as fused into a whole. That's the higher fifth ray because the lower fifth ray seems to see only the separate instance, but the higher fifth ray under Venus on the mountaintop of Transfiguration and using the Ascension Center does see the whole. And with exactitude, these types of love are welded into the purpose which the first ray appreciates, understands, and towards that purpose found on the monadic and logoic planes and its earthly consummation, the seventh ray gives all it has, which is it's a balanced ray. The seventh ray has a balance of will, love, and activity. So it's very resourceful and full of practical solutions. Well, all of these rays will emerge with greater clarity as the time passes, and they will be seen working out in the different groups of human beings who are each making their contribution to the effectiveness and harmony of the whole. Well, DK says it's not been easy to put these abstruse ideas expressed in the most archaic language and symbolism into modern terms and words. So I must say, like this, is it easy for us to understand? That's understood, but UND is understand. Okay, so UND, and we will do our best here. That's one of those words that always appears. So he's had some difficulty translating it, and we have difficulty interpreting it. But if we stay with any difficult section of text, we ponder it, brood upon it long enough, the meaning or sufficient meaning will come through. I have but conveyed the general idea, the collaboration of all the seven rays in the building process of deity. Now, actually, what I want to just kind of copy that and say this is what we're talking about here when we enter this. This is about the collaboration of all the seven rays in the building process of deity. And their planned interaction on a tiny scale, infinitesimal in comparison with the great whole. So you might say that, as soon as I get this bracket in order, we might say that even our local and relatively great seven rays are tiny operators when compared with the dynamics of the great whole. And that's the universe. Man responds within the circle of humanity, enclosed within the greater circle of the hierarchy, and becomes conscious of this fusion and uses the potencies of both groups of lives through the medium of the antakarana. And so what is this really saying? That the antakarana makes available to us the potencies of hierarchy. And without it, these potencies are not available. So right now we wield the energies available to the average human being. We have thought, creativity, we have desire, we have vitality and action. But there are higher energies that will be available to us when we learn how to bridge towards them. The moment the disciple approaches that point in consciousness, and the antakarana is firmly anchored, even if as yet but a tenuous structure, he becomes aware of the factor of the greater circle, which encloses the other two. So, we are speaking of concentric circles and spheres, made of which we become cognizant one after another. Okay. So are we really conscious of Shambhala? I think not. But it looms ahead when we begin to include within our consciousness the sphere of hierarchy. The secret place where the will of God is formulated for the immediate present and for the long-range future, and that will becomes divine purpose. Okay. So our task to firmly anchor the antakarana, even if between the mental unit and monastic permanent atom, and then further as we begin to project and enter the Buddhic and Atmic worlds, and finally the monadic world. All of this becomes possible to us in some small degree when we have taken the third initiation. the process can really begin. Up till that time, it is preparatory. So we have, he's given us a vision and suggested preamble. So let us now ascertain. The word ascertain means to make certain. I don't know if we can do that. The 7 techniques to be employed at the projection stage of the building process. So now we enter upon the particulars. And, he'll give us as much as we can assimilate. Much will still be left toward for our practice. Excuse me. Ray 1, will or power. These are, let us remember words of power to be applied in the projection process. That's basically what we're dealing with, and these are words of power. Later, our work with magic will become more accomplished, and we'll be able to use these properly. To understand the first ray technique, the basic quality of the ray must be grasped. It is dynamic. Well, what do we mean by that? Forceful and impelling movement. It is a kind of prime mover. The point at the center is the first ray of power. This is found in the sun symbol of the master. And its technique is never to move from the center, but from that point to work dynamically. Now, three signs of the zodiac are particularly associated here. 3 signs of the zodiac all right, are particularly involved with the first ray, and they are Aries, Leo, and Capricorn. Okay, I keep on discovering how many are needed here. This will, of course, subside as the majority of these abbreviations get put in. And here, Leo is the one that never moves from the center. So it represents that central point, the kingship, the center of the circle. The other 2, Aries and Capricorn, move more. Perhaps the word that would best express its mode is inspiration. That's a really important statement. We might call this the breathing in of deity or godliness. The Father inspires. Inspires, we might say, draws forth fire, forth a dynamic fire. The Father inspires response from the material aspect or from the Mother, if you like, that symbolism, but it accomplishes this by remaining immovably itself. Now, this is when we want to think about the first ray. We're not just thinking about the headlong charge of the ram or of Aries, or the impositional factor of Capricorn, but we are thinking about a dynamic, inspiring centrality. It remains immovably itself. What am I? Well, Leo is the key to identity. I am that I am. So the father aspect inspires the mother to respond, and it does so by remaining immovably itself. From the point where he is, the builder, human or divine, as there will be divine builders later, works, not by the law of attraction, as does the second ray, but by the law of synthesis. Okay, let's get that straight. Working by the law of synthesis. And I think I'll just put that in. Okay, and we'll see if that will work. The very first cosmic law, the law of synthesis. By the law of synthesis, by a fiat of the will, based on a clearly formulated purpose and program. So, immovable and clear and inspiring. You will see, therefore, that, now this is a peculiar thing, that the first ray personality, what does he mean? Is this, is the soul-infused personality the personality of the monad triad? Because we are really speaking here of first-ray souls, in these techniques. The first-ray personality has to ascertain, as in fact do all disciples, which aspect he himself is of a particular ray. Well, this is not an easy statement. I'm just going to underline it because he's using different words here than we would expect. The projection technique is accomplished according to the soul ray and not the personality ray, unless he means that when you become a soul-infused personality, you are something like, with triadal influence, you are something like the personality of the monad. So the soul has to be part of that personality, and that number 3 is absorbed by the one above and the one below. The first ray personality has to ascertain, as in fact do all disciples, which aspect he is of a particular ray, and we have to ask here, does he mean the monadic ray? Okay, so we're going to do this monadic R-Y. Okay, monadic ray. So, the soul ray is a subray of the monadic ray, just the way the personality is a subray of the soul ray. And when he talks about which aspect he is of a particular ray, we may be talking about these subrays. Okay, MDCR. I'll have to do that once again. Monadic ray. It is not possible for any disciple who has not taken the third initiation to ascertain, and let's just say know with certainty. He can guess, he can suppose, he can hypothesize, but to ascertain is to know with certainty. Is monadic ray, but any disciple building the antakarana who has reached the stage of projection as the first two stages may take a while, should know his soul ray and his personality ray, and should remember that their fused or blended potency must perform the act of projection. So this is a fact that we must understand. It is not the personality ray alone which does or performs the act of projection. So a fusing of the soul and personality ray, their accurate knowledge of these is necessary for successful, really finally successful projection. And I'm going to PRR, and we're going to call that personality ray. Okay. The energy of the monad can be evoked, but it results in a downpouring towards its working agent, and it is not an active projection per se. All right, this is so important. Every little sentence here stands out. A downpouring from the monad is not an act of projection. The act of projection is the work of the shadow and reflection, and that is what we are, the shadow and the reflection, the soul and personality, or the personality which has absorbed a good measure of soul energy. The old commentary says in this connection, when dealing with the word of power for each ray, when there is no shadow, for the sun is clear, and no reflection, for the water is no more. For the sun is clear, and no reflection, for the water is no more. Now, here he can mean the egoic lotus here. We might think when we hear water that it's always the astral plane, but the soul itself is sometimes associated with the water element. Then naught remains but the one who stands with eyes directing life and form, because we can say the middle principle has been eliminated. The threefold shadow now is one, so that's what we mean by shadow. We mean the personality. The threefold shadow now is one. The three of self exists no more. And maybe this is the soul characterized by the number 3. The 3 petals, the ninefoldness of these 3 petals, or the jewel, the petals and the permanent, the atomic triangle, those are the 3. The higher 3 descend, and all the 9 are one. Await the time. Now, what do we have here? The higher 3 descends, and all the 9 are one. How can we count? How can we count? Well, there's different ways. Monad is 3. Spiritual Triad is 3. The threefold shadow is also 3. The 3 of the egoic lotus have been eliminated. But if we don't want to have the descending monad, well, let's see. The sun is clear and no reflection, for the water is no more. That could be the astral plane. It could be the egoic lotus, or possibly the astral plane. Then naught remains but the one who stands with eyes directing life and form. Now that's that, DK referred to it, that tiny point of consciousness. The threefold shadow now is one. The three of self exists no more, and that does seem to suggest the soul of the egoic lotus. The higher three descends, and all the nine are one. Well, there are different ways to look at this. The monad is, after all, the monad is threefold: will, wisdom, and activity. The triad, atma, buddhi, manas. If the three of self has to do with the egoic lotus, then we are past the fourth initiation. And then there are nine because we have the threefold shadow. Really, when we look at it all, we have a 12. Here's 3, here's 3, here's 3, and here are 3. That's a 12. And one of these threes is eliminated after the fourth degree. This particular 3, the egoic lotus, is eliminated. Well, this is all very deep. When therefore the ray of the soul dominates the ray of the personality, then the self becomes the acting agent, aided by the ray of the lower self. Now, here DK has clarified what he means by self. And it does seem to be the soul. So the self becomes the acting agent because we have a soul infusion. We have a soul infusion, soul infused personality, and the ray of the soul is dominant. Aided by the ray of the lower self. So we know that, from this we know that the word self, and I would usually capitalize it, we know here that the word self means the soul within the egoic lotus. The rays of the three vehicles are no longer active, but only the basic duality of soul and personality remains, and there is no lesser differentiation. This, when adding the spiritual triad, is another way to arrive at 3. Then the monad becomes the 4th. Well, okay. This is not easy material, but we have to think together about it in such a way that it begins to really make sense. These sections from the old commentary are, usually opaque at times, and we have to penetrate when there is no shadow, for the sun is clear. In other words, this is the clarifying, let's call it the banishing of the lower elementals. And no reflection, for the water is no more. I'm suspecting that the egoic lotus is the reflection of the monad, or triad. Then naught remains but the one who stands with eyes directing life and form. That's that tiny point of consciousness which he says remains. The threefold shadow now is one. The 3 of self exists no more. 3, maybe the 3 of self, we might say, has to do with the egoic lotus. And the higher 3 descend, and all the 9 are one. Await the time. Well, I'm seeing here a unified personality which has absorbed soul energy. I'm seeing the spiritual triad. I'm seeing the monad. These are a 9 because the 3 of self have been eliminated. But, there are various ways to count, and we have to examine those. When, therefore, the ray of the soul dominates the ray of the personality, then the self becomes the active agent. So it is in a way, the self absorbed by the personality. The self absorbed by the personality. The self becomes the active agent, aided by the ray of the lower self. So we absorb the soul ray in a way. It is the same as the ray of the triad, interestingly. At least it's the same as one of the rays of the triad. The rays of the 3 vehicles are no longer active, but only the basic duality of soul and personality remain, and there is no lesser differentiation. We find this actually when we look at the rays of the planets. We're given the soul ray and the personality ray if one learns how to recognize those when DK is talking about them, but we're not so much given the differentiation of mind, emotions, and body of the planets, because these great beings have moved far beyond that stage. In considering these 7 rays, I seek to do 3 things. Okay, so now I think it probably pays to go on here, make a 2-hour program out of it. We will go on and make a 2-hour program because we are already past the 1-hour point. So, something in me just wants to ponder and ponder this. Then the self becomes the active agent. Now, another way to look at the self, of course, is as the spiritual triad. And the ray of the spiritual triad, the major ray of the spiritual triad, which is not imposed by the monad, is the same as the ray of the soul. So we have 2 rays here. Eventually, basically, what we're going to do is we are going to put 3 rays together. And that's another one of those ones that we need together. We're going to put 3 rays together and finally end up with the ray of the personality, the ray of the triad soul, and the ray of the monad. And this will be the synthesis, and each one of those is basically threefold. Each of these is threefold. Will, wisdom, and activity, Atma, Buddhi, Manas, and in the soul-infused personality, the soul-infused mind, soul-infused sentient nature, and the soul-infused vitality. Whether we're dealing with a 9 or dealing with a 12, whether we're dealing with a 3 or dealing with a 2, understanding of the process will reveal that. Okay, and we will go on in just a little bit. Okay, so we've been looking at what represents 9, what represents 12. In a way, the spiritual triad is the true ego or the true soul, and its 3ness takes the place of the 3ness of what we call the soul in the egoic body, or the soul in the egoic lotus. When the shroud of the soul is destroyed at the 4th degree, we really have the spiritual triad taking the place of soul. It's strongly conditioned by both the second ray, because it has an intermediate position, but also by the first ray, because it is an expression of the personality of the monad. And then the lower duality increasingly becomes one. The soul and personality are a duality at first, but really they become one because the personality has somehow absorbed the energy of the soul. There's kind of a rising of part of what we used to call the soul into the spiritual triad, and there's also a deliberate descent of what we used to call soul into the personality, so that it becomes a soul-infused personality, and so the personality can express the qualities of the soul through its ordinary daily activities. Eventually, it's not necessary to have that kind of personality. It's going to be a personality generated from the permanent atoms of the spiritual triad, which have absorbed all of this quality and potency of the soul within the egoic lotus when the fourth initiation has occurred. Then the triad becomes the generator. The monad triad becomes the generator of the lower Maya Virupa, which will definitely be a triadally infused personality and probably really a monadically infused personality. So let's take a look here, continuing, because this will be more a 2-hour program, because I've gone beyond my limit and we're still in the middle of the subject. In considering all these 7 rays, I seek to do 3 things in every case. Give the technique of projection. Okay. And this technique falls into 4 stages. The preparatory stage, in which the consciousness becomes focused in the soul ray. Okay, so before we can project, we have to really focus within the soul ray. We have to know it. But generally, I advise people, okay, if you don't know your soul ray, at least use the second ray when doing the group work. An interlude, B, an interlude in which the projecting agent realizes with intensity the existence of the point of tension and the finished product of the visualization process. So we are that point of projection, that bystanding point, and we have to realize what has been gathered and built, and imaginatively built. Then we don't dare leave any of these sections out. Then a focused activity of the will according to the ray, in which a line of light or living substance is imaginatively and creatively sent out and projected from the mental unit as far as possible towards the spiritual triad using the creative imagination. Oftentimes I suggest, well, you know, a line of white light. Of course, we could use the color of the soul ray, but I'm thinking that he doesn't specify this line of light. Maybe he does specify coming up here. A focused activity of the will according to the ray, in which a line of light or of living substance is imaginatively and creatively sent out or projected from the mental unit, which we visualize upon the 4th subplane of the mental plane, as far as possible, maybe as far as imagination will carry it, or as far as we are prepared to responsively carry it, towards the spiritual triad, using constantly the creative imagination. It seems to be dependent on the creative imagination from one perspective, but also on how much, also, you know, let's just say here, dependent on the creative imagination, but also on the degree of sensitivity to manas, buddhi, and atma. This line of light, this strand or bridge, is then pictured as colored by the two ray qualities. Well, in a way, we have been building this through the visualization, have we not? We have been building this dual colored bridge through visualization already. And it is held stably aligned in the light of the triad and not in the light of the soul. So it seems that we project a colored strand, or vivify, we may vivify the dual colored strands in the act of projection. And it's held stably aligned in the light of the spiritual triad, not in the light of the soul. This corresponds to the much earlier stage of development in which the mind was held steady in delight, and he calls it much earlier. So we realize we're dealing with an advanced process. The mind is still held in this manner, but the mind, as the agent of the soul and the personality, is no longer quiescent, but becomes an active holding agent, retaining the necessary energies at the necessary point of tension. Okay. Well, this is, the technique falls into 4 stages. Reviewing. We become the consciousness, or that tiny point of observation, really an extension of the monad, becomes focused in the soul ray. The interlude, where we are as the projecting agent, which is the tiny point of consciousness, we realize with intensity the existence of the point of tension and the finished product of the visualization process. And that is, that visualization process is a connecting process of the Buddhic energies, the retained energies within the point of tension, and the energies of the creative imagination, the astral energies. Then a focused activity of the will, using a word of power, in which a line of light or of living substance is imaginatively and creatively sent out or projected from the mental unit. So that is the mental unit is the platform for projection. Using constantly the creative imagination, not subsiding, continuing to visualize. And this line of light, this strand or bridge, is then pictured as colored by the two ray qualities. I suppose the question arises when we're visualizing, do we visualize this bridge and vivify it, or do we not visualize the colored bridge and project it from the mental unit? That I still have to clarify here. And it is held stably aligned in the light of the spiritual triad, not the light of the soul. The light of the spiritual triad, we imagine the light of Atma, Buddhi, Manas, but not the light of the soul. And it's a higher correspondence to the earlier stage of holding the mind steady in the light. the mind becomes an active holding agent and also an active projecting agent. All right. So what we've been doing, and I just reviewed it, he says, in considering all these 7 rays, I'm seeking to do 3 things in every case. And now point 2, indicate briefly the effect of the word of power. He's going to try to do that because there are various blinds connected with these words of power, and there are pronunciation problems, and he doesn't give us the pronunciation really of any of them and doesn't even indicate them for all. He works in the world of meaning, rather. Indicate briefly the effect of the word of power when adequate stability has been acquired, presumably in this projection process or this vivification of the already imagined bridge. The disciple utters a word of power which serves to carry the light still further on and up. Still further. So further than where the disciple has managed to project the bridge. So the vivification of the higher aspects of the bridge. Vivification of the higher aspects of the bridge. So what happens when this word of power is uttered? Goodness, this really has to be outlined in such a way that it is utterly, every step is utterly clear. I'm just aware of the Tibetans' method of presenting the information, and I think we could boil it down in such a manner that it would be clearer to our mental processes. When correctly uttered, this word produces 3 effects. It keeps the channel for the descending light of the spiritual triad clear of all impediments. Now we remember that there will be an evocative response from the higher reaches of our energy system. And that from the monad and from the triad, there will be energy sent forth to meet the bridge which we have been building. Energy is sent forth to meet the bridge which the soul-infused personality has been building. Okay, so the word of power keeps the channel open. The channel. It reaches by means of its vibratory activity the center of power, which we call the spiritual triad, focused temporarily in the monastic permanent atom. That's when we begin to build the bridge. That's about as far as we've gotten. When we begin to build the bridge, the monastic permanent atom is about as high as we can penetrate and evokes a response in the form of a thread of descending triadal light. So the word of power evokes a response from the spiritual triad, apparently towards the monastic permanent atom, where the higher part of our bridge, produced by the soul-infused personality, is focused at first. Okay. You can understand why we really have to routine this process. We cannot get caught in all the technicalities, and yet at the same time, we have to have mastered these technicalities. Okay, the word of power causes a vibration throughout the antakarana, which in its turn evokes response from the rainbow bridge as built by all other disciples. Okay, the word of power causes a vibration throughout the antakarana, which in its turn evokes response from the rainbow bridge built by all other disciples. So this encourages the work of group antakarana building. Thus, the work of constructing the racial antakarana is furthered, and we might say that we all stimulate each other, and the bridge building of one stimulates the bridge building of the others. Now, DK is dealing with very subtle matters, and as I go through this, I say to myself, oh goodness, this must be reviewed and reviewed and reviewed, and notes taken in strict order so we can understand every stage of the process. Now, DK stops occasionally to tell us what he's doing so that we don't get lost. I am here doing two things, speaking to you in symbols. There is literally speaking no up and down or higher and lower, as you know, nor do any of the separative actions as outlined by the occult sciences exist. So he's telling us the truth of the matter, but we do have methods which, though not really real, are heuristically useful. They are instructive, even if they are not real. They are symbolic, if not real. And they are a process which we must follow to reach the reality and understand how it works. Yet the truth has to be thus presented owing to the mind, consciousness of the disciple, which is, what should we say, it is dominated by the limitation or limitations of sequence and partial perception, and not holistic perception. So I've also been giving in human terms, as the masters would probably present this whole process in other terms when discussing it with each other or reviewing it with each other. I have also been giving in human terms the outline of a process which, if adequately followed, will enable you to make real progress in the preparatory understanding required by all who hope one day, someday, to take initiation. Now, by this he means the third initiation and above, and not the initiations of the threshold. So let's put that in a plural. Initiations of the threshold. No, these are the real initiations, beginning with the first solar initiation, which is the third, and it's look at this, only preparatory understanding. I think that when some people claim to have taken the third degree, they should look closely at some of DK's words, which make it seem a little more difficult and a little more remote and a little more subtle than they might have thought. So now, thus far, we've had 3 points. The first point relating to the general technique of projection and how we have to use the soul ray and the point of tension and call in the will and project from the mental unit a dual colored light, or at least vivify a dual colored light which we may have already imagined. And then the word of power, its effect is discussed, the clearing effect of it, and the evocative effect. Let's call this all this in this section. We speak of the evocative, and then the evocation, the group evocation, and the stimulation of the antakarana process in those who, together with the individual, are building the antakarana. And he's basically telling us this is a heuristic method, it's an instructional method, which allows us to pursue a process which will be eventually helpful and help us make real progress in the task of preparing to take initiation. Now he brings up a third point, the nature of initiation. Initiation falls into 3 major expanses of consciousness. So in general, the antakarana and the building processes suggested lead towards initiation. So, what are the 3 major expansions of consciousness? He does, of course, discuss the different initiations, but here I think he's looking at them in a general overview. And first, the expansion of the consciousness of the dedicated personality into that of the soul. This is completely consummated at the 3rd initiation, and we truly become soul conscious and can focus our consciousness within the causal body. Then, next, the expansion of this fused and blended consciousness. The techniques of fusion take us this far, and even the techniques of integration with the soul are an aspect of the techniques of fusion. The expansion of this fused and blended consciousness into that of the spiritual triad, completely consummated at the 5th initiation. This is so important. This is like one of those references that you go looking for, and there it is years later. But complete triadal consciousness, or the fusing of the soul-infused consciousness into the spiritual triad, occurs at the 5th degree. And that is another one we want, FFD, 5th degree. Okay. And then the 3rd expansion of consciousness towards which the masters are working, which is consummated at the 7th degree. So basically what we have, 3 expansions, the consummations of which occur at the 3rd, 5th, and 7th degrees. Now, at the 7th degree, we have complete monadic consciousness or awareness, and perhaps even free of the monadic vehicle on the monadic plane. Okay, PM. Well, let's put that in. Monadic plane. And also we'll put in free of the monadic vehicle. MDVC. MDVC. Oh no, it's It's MDCV. Okay. Monadic vehicle. Because there is a sense in which one escapes onto the logoic level as a liberated volatile essence in the alchemical process. So, yeah, this is indeed an overview. 3 major expansions of consciousness, and let's just say a number of initiations fit into these general categories. A number of initiations. So the 1st and 2nd lead to the 3rd, the 3rd and 4th lead to the 5th, the 5th, 6th, and 7th, 5th and 6th lead to the 7th, and in each case the point of consummation, 3rd, 5th, and 7th. Interesting that they are odd numbers. Students today have made much progress towards the control of the personality, and the disciples of the world are now so numerous that the hierarchical emphasis is today upon states of consciousness which follow the 3rd initiation. So basically, he's not just taking us to an understanding of the 3rd, he takes us to an understanding even of the 4th and 5th and 6th. I mean, he deals all the way up to the 9th initiation in this book. So the 4th degree is emphasized, and the 5th, and let's just say instruction, is given out on the 5th degree. Okay. Hence the giving out to the public of the teaching upon the antakarana, and this is a big hint if you look at it, because basically he's saying the antakarana instruction takes us beyond the 3rd degree. Okay, TRD? No, let's just say it's TD. All right, we're hoping that this is proceeding properly. Sometimes the electronics here can get in the way. 3rd degree. Okay. So we are being certainly given an advanced teaching. And the 3rd degree is not our only objective. It is maybe the objective in sight for a number of the more advanced students, but we've been also instructed about the 4th degree and the 5th degree, and even degrees beyond. Maybe quite a bit of information is given on the 6th, not so much on the 7th, and very little on the 8th and 9th, but at least they are mentioned. Okay, well, you know, this is just a preliminary working in this valuable material, and we will have to go over and over it. You will find below in tabulated form the teaching and then the 6 stages, so that you may make a visual picture of the intended process. All of this is foundational, and let us build the foundation carefully and save much time in the future. Okay, the following of the process is, of course, another matter, and its success depends upon more than a theoretical grasp of the process. Now, this is where our responsibility is really entering, and it is complicated. And the question, it's complicated at first, and the question arises, will we take the trouble really to follow these instructions? The following of the process is, of course, another matter, and its success is dependent upon more than a theoretical grasp of the process. It is dependent upon your ability to live more definitely in the world of meaning than hitherto, upon your knowledge of your soul and personality rays, and upon your capacity to focus your blended consciousness, blended soul personality consciousness, and from that point, holding the mind steady in the light, utter the word of power, which will carry your created thread of light, dual-colored light, forward towards the spiritual triad. Now, this is something that I really am questioning in myself. The visualization process, we have to review. It definitely involves the attempt to imagine the Buddhic relationships in the field of pure reason. It definitely involves the understanding of that pool of retained energies which are coming from the personality below and are coming also from the soul, that is from the egoic petal energies and from the energies of the jewel and the lotus. And it involves, this ability to understand what the creative imagination can produce. But here's the question. When we visualize the connection between these three, Buddhi, the retained energies at the point of tension, and the creative imagination, do we visualize the rainbow bridge of 2 colors at that time, connecting with the monastic permanent atom, or do we wait until the projection phase to send forth this dual strand of energy? Let's hope that we can clarify this as we move along. Now, he's going to give us here an outline for reflective contemplation on constructing the antakarana. This is our meditation. So, for this work. And we'll get into that here in just a moment. So now we are going to enter this outline. Let's see if we can finish it now, or at least the first part of it. Outline for reflective contemplation on constructing the antakarana. Notice the word contemplation, because it tells us something about the degree of advancement. Advanced meditation. Advanced meditation, and the Libran or Libran phase of the work. So considerable blending of the soul and personality must have occurred. The much overcoming of the subject-object duality must have occurred before this is possible. So, points to have in mind. He keeps on summarizing these things over and over for us, and hopefully we'll get them, but I'm just aware, having studied this maybe for some 40 years, that consistent restudying of the sequential process will lead to a condition of non-sequentiality in our approach, or at least there will be a much more flowing sense of approach without having to go through the particular phases in such a discrete, concrete-minded manner. So points to have in mind: this work of construction concerns the handling of energy. Students should ponder on the distinction between energy and force. So we are not particularly dealing with the forces of the personality, but with the energies of the soul and spiritual triad. It is dependent upon so this suggests the stage of intention, the first stage. It is dependent upon the use of the creative imagination. Students would do well to reflect upon the relationship of the imagination to the intuition and of both to the mind. Well, we are told in a way that the creative imagination is a lower aspect of the intuition, and it has there is a reciprocal effect between the creative imagination and the mind. The mind can trim or restrain or somehow edit the content of the creative imagination, and the creative imagination can fertilize the mind and give it new substance to think about. When it comes to the creative imagination and its relationship to the intuition, there can be a direct line into intuitive apprehension if the symbols and forms created by the creative imagination resonate with the Buddhic sphere. We also need to ensure that the creations of the creative imagination resonate to the energies and patterns found within the Buddhic sphere of consciousness. Thus, we must purify the creative imagination and make sure that its content somehow reflects Buddhi. Ensure that the content of the creative imagination reflects Buddhi. Yeah, and there's a good Buddhi for us, a B-I, and B-U-D-D-H-I. Okay. So this means the purificatory work must be well established before we can do anything along these lines. Okay, so energy, handling of energy, this is about intention. And creative imagination, this is about the visualization work. Let's see what comes next. The work of building the antakarana must be done with as much conscious understanding as possible. So we are the observer, and we must stay on track and and not just allow a kind of mindless flow of phantasmagoria. Okay, so we have the 6 steps or methods of building the antakarana. Intention, which involves the achieving of right orientation towards the soul and towards the spiritual triad. The soul ray has to be understood. The spiritual triad has to be considered and some line of rapport created. A mental understanding of the work to be done is necessary as we stand back and do not allow ourselves to drift into active imagination, which is not creative imagination or visualization. Anything goes with active imagination. We can't allow that process to continue. It has to be edited. A ring pass knot of consciously gathered energies must be created, visualized, drawn up from below and drawn down from the soul and held in a state of tension. And remember that the 12 petals and the jewel in the lotus are involved in creating this point of tension. Okay, so PTL is petal, and PTLS is petals. PTLS. Okay. Your sacrifice, friends, is the gain of others who will benefit from this all later. And then a period of clear thinking anent this process of intention must be attempted. So we know exactly what we're trying to do and from whence the energies are coming. And then follows the preservation of a point of tension. This cannot be ignored. The holding of the retained energies so that we realize they are consciously held. CSL, consciously. Then comes visualization. We still have some ongoing questions here, at least the way I've been practicing this. I want to make sure it's correct. The use of the creative imagination of the picture-making faculty. Of what are we making the picture? Well, maybe of the energies on the Buddhic plane, maybe of the energies on the astral plane. The use of the creative imagination or picture-making faculty, I have usually built a 2-stranded bridge with these. Response to intuitional or Buddhic impression. So getting the visualizing what this relatively formless energy is, and then preoccupation with 2 energies. The energy held at the point of tension within the previously created ring pass knot, and the active picture forming energy brought into action by the mind of the builder. So that is visualization, because the mind is involved and guides the creative imagination according to the intention of the mind. He's summarizing for us, right? And then we have projection, the calling in of the will through the method appropriate of the ray of the disciple. There are seven types of will, and we have reviewed them, 7 types of will, to initiate, to unify, to evolve, to harmonize, to act, to cause, to express. And the simultaneous preservation of 3 lines of thought. Awareness of the blended personality and soul, from that little point of awareness, which seems to be at this point an extension of the divine observer. Awareness of the blended personality and soul, awareness of the point of focused tension, awareness of the ray in its will aspect. So many of us might use the will to unify, second ray method. I'm going to get all these aspects of the will down, but not this moment, sparing you that, or the will to unification, and the use of one or other of the 7 ray methods of projection according to the ray of the disciple. And this would be the use of the word of power. Okay, now these stages are within our relative control, and increasingly so. Then comes invocation, which we can still act within, and then evocation, which we cannot. The blended soul personality are now invocative, and their united intention is expressed in the 3 previous stages. So we have created the invocative soul-infused personality. Okay, we have created the invocative soul-infused personality. Then a response comes from the spiritual triad. Now, we do not initiate this response, but the tension of the lower evokes the attention of the higher. So then a response comes from the spiritual triad, which that intention, propelled by an act of will from a point of tension, has evoked. Oh, that's a very clear sentence, but still we should ponder it. With sufficient tension and the right use of the creative imagination, plus a propulsion dependent on the will, there will be a triadal evocation. Now, I just want to say that probably for all of us, all of this will become easier when we actually do it. And do it repeatedly. I think for the rest of our lives, we can never give up this antakaranic approach. It's not something you just study once. You know, in the Moria Federation, we have a section in which we study this, but it really must be continued in order to become habituated, and so that the apparently separate little processes within the overall process become fused and blended together. So this is invocation and evocation. Stabilization is out of our hands. This is brought about by long, patient use of the 4 previous processes, and followed by a conscious use of the antakarana to evoke the response of the spiritual triad for service purposes. And then resurrection and ascension, well, these are the higher states of initiation, corresponding to higher states of initiation. This is the rising up of the consciousness out of soul and personality limitations from the angle of the monad, and it's passing into that of the spiritual triad, and this is the level in which the consciousness of the masters is focused. So here we have, an outline of 6 stages. And it's very clear. It simply has to be practiced. Now, he did give us this outline in a little more elaborated form earlier, but now he's condensing the whole matter for us. And I think we can end this now, end of Ray's and Initiation webinar commentary, number 45, on this day, the 21st of January, and to say about 2 hours. And the pages involved are from 506 to, oh goodness, have we gone that far? To 513. I think so. Have we gone that far? Well, maybe it is so. And then beginning of Ray's and Initiation webinar commentary, number 46, and we'll see if we can do any more of this today. And page 513. So we're covering very deep, heavy, heavy at first material, which really has to be technically assimilated. As I consider this again, I realize how much better a job at assimilation I might have done over the years, and I'm glad that I'm being forced, or I'm forcing myself to reconsider this whole process so that this advanced method of meditation can be incorporated into my usual approach, and hopefully that can be the case for everybody, and at least the stage of evocation can be reached, and with successive use, stabilization as well. And then now I see, of course, why it's longer, because we have a 2-hour program here, of course. So let us go forward and continue this very necessary examination of a process which should flow as we do it, but which has so many technicalities which all have to be observed and in place that at first it will not flow. At first it will have to be very slowly and carefully constructed, and even one life is probably not enough when a person begins to get anything like the full use out of the antakarana. So we'll see you for number 46, and thank you for studying it in this way. As I say, one of our friends is doing a great job in transcribing this verbally, and I'm not saying that my words are as exact as they would be if I was simply writing a book, but at least this has a certain conversational flow to it, and you'll understand how I'm thinking about it, and you can arrive at your own conclusions. All the best. See you soon. Bye-bye.